Imagine a man who became the face of hope for millions of children, a man who wore the Superman cape not only on screen, but also carried the weight of expectations in real life, a man whose smile inspired a generation, yet whose final night became one of Hollywood's deepest mysteries. This is the extraordinary, inspiring, and tragic journey of George Reeves, the first television Superman, a man who flew into fame, crashed into struggle, and left behind a story the world still talks about. Today, you will hear his complete story, his dreams, his battles, his rise, his fall, and the unsolved questions that still follow his name. This is the real history of George Reeves. 1. A quiet beginning, early life. George Reeves was born as George Kiefer Brewer on January 5, 1914, in Woolstock, Iowa. His parents separated almost immediately after his birth, leaving his mother to raise him alone. To build a stable life, she moved with young George to Pasadena, California, a place filled with sunshine, artists, travelers, and dreamers. This new environment shaped George's imagination from the very beginning. Growing up, George was full of energy. He loved sports, especially boxing and music. But something else stood out even more: he loved performing. Whether it was reading stories, acting in school plays, or entertaining his friends, George had a spark that made people pay attention. His mother remarried when he was a child, and George soon took the surname of his stepfather, calling himself George Basolo for many years. But the change did not stop him from dreaming big. In high school, George discovered the world of acting more seriously. He joined school productions and impressed his teachers with his deep voice, expressive face, and strong stage presence. They encouraged him to pursue acting professionally, and eventually, he enrolled in the Pasadena Playhouse, one of the most respected acting schools in the country. Here, George learned everything: voice control, stage movement, character building, fighting scenes, and dramatic expression. Many Hollywood legends came from this same school, and George wanted to be one of them. But Hollywood success never comes easily. And George was about to learn this truth step by step. 2. The golden opening, Hollywood entry. In the late 1930s, George began auditioning for roles. At first, he faced rejection after rejection: too tall, too athletic, too new, too different. But he kept trying. He attended every audition he could find, memorized scripts for hours, and constantly improved his craft. His moment finally arrived in 1939, when he landed a small role in one of the greatest films ever made, Gone with the Wind. He played Stuart Tarleton, one of the charming young men who competed for Scarlett O'Hara's attention. Even though his role was short, being part of such a massive production gave George hope. He had now stepped into Hollywood's spotlight. Over the next few years, George acted in films such as The Westerner, So Proudly We Hail, Samson and Delilah, Blood and Sand. He worked with respected directors and talented actors, playing cowboys, soldiers, and romantic characters. His reputation grew slowly, and people began to recognize him as a sincere, hard-working actor. But like many young men of the time, George's life changed when the world went to war. 3. War duty, World War II. When the United States entered World War II, George Reeves joined the U.S. Army Air Forces. Instead of fighting on the front lines, he was assigned to create training films that helped soldiers learn safety rules, aircraft operations, and communication systems. These films were essential for the war, and George took the responsibility seriously. His experience in acting made the training films professional and clear. But the war also paused his Hollywood career. When George returned to civilian life after the war, Hollywood had changed. New stars had emerged, directors had moved on, and the industry was adjusting to a new era. George had to rebuild his career almost from scratch. 4. The role that changed everything, becoming Superman. In 1951, George auditioned for a role that would change his life forever: Superman in the television series, Adventures of Superman. The show offered two major roles wrapped into one: Superman, the powerful hero; Clark Kent, the gentle reporter. George delivered both roles with a perfect balance of strength and kindness. He knew that children would look up to him, so he played the character with honesty, respect, and warmth. When the show aired in 1952, it became an instant hit. Suddenly, George Reeves was everywhere: posters, newspapers, events, television ads. Kids saw him as a real-life hero. Parents trusted him. He became a symbol of hope during a time when the world needed positivity. George did not just play Superman, he lived Superman. He visited children's hospitals, charity events, community programs, and schools, often for little or no payment. He believed that if he could make a child smile or feel safe, it was worth every second. But fame is never simple. And despite his success, George's life behind the scenes was filled with challenges he never showed the public. 5. The pain behind the cape, struggles of fame. As Adventures of Superman continued, George expected Hollywood to offer him bigger roles. But something unexpected happened. He became typecast. This means directors only saw him as Superman, not as an actor capable of playing other roles. If he auditioned for a cowboy film, they said, "Sorry, you look too much like Superman." If he auditioned for a crime drama, they said, "We can't cast Superman as a criminal." If he tried out for a romantic film, they said, "The audience will think Superman is falling in love." At first, George laughed about it. But eventually, it became a serious problem. He loved the character, but he did not want to be trapped in it forever. To make things worse, the salary of television actors in the 1950s was extremely low compared to movie stars. George had fame, but not the fortune people assumed he had. He also faced personal challenges, relationship issues, emotional stress, and the heavy responsibility of being a hero to millions of young viewers. George wanted to break free, but the world would not let him. 6. Searching for a new path. Despite the pressure, George tried hard to reinvent himself. He directed a few episodes of Adventures of Superman. He wrote story ideas and scripts. He tried taking roles in small plays and independent films. He hoped Hollywood would see him beyond the cape. But each time he tried to move forward, the industry pushed him back into the same box. People loved Superman, but they forgot the man behind the suit. George Reeves was trapped between fame and frustration. 7. The final year, 1958-1959. By 1958, the Superman show had ended. George was planning a new future. He wanted to get married, buy a home, and restart his career. He even talked to producers about making a Superman movie, but not as a lifelong role, only as a stepping stone for bigger opportunities. Things seemed like they might finally be improving. But on the night of June 16, 1959, everything changed forever. 8. The night of mystery, his death. On that night, George Reeves died from a gunshot wound to the head in his home in Los Angeles. He was 45 years old. The official report said it was suicide. But almost immediately, questions appeared. People who knew him said he was planning his wedding. Friends said he was optimistic about future projects. Some people in the house that night gave confusing statements. No fingerprints were found on the gun. Multiple shots were reportedly heard. Soon, 3 major theories appeared. 1. Suicide. Because of career frustration and personal stress, some believed he took his own life. 2. Accident. Some believed the gun went off accidentally during a moment of carelessness. 3. Murder. Others believed someone in the house might have been responsible, due to jealousy, arguments, or personal conflicts. To this day, the death of George Reeves remains one of Hollywood's most debated mysteries. No one knows the truth with certainty. 9. His legacy, what he leaves behind. Even though George Reeves lived a short and difficult life, his impact is enormous. He became the first true television superhero. Long before modern Hollywood made billion-dollar superhero movies, George showed the world that heroes could inspire people of all ages. He became a symbol of hope for children. Kids trusted him. They believed in him. He made them feel safe and strong. He paved the way for all future Supermen. From Christopher Reeve to Henry Cavill, every Superman actor followed the path George created. He proved that kindness matters. Behind the costume, George was warm, gentle, and generous. He respected his fans and treated people with dignity. He showed the world the reality of fame. His life reflects the struggles actors face behind the scenes, the pressure, the loneliness, the typecasting, the silent battles. He became a legend not because he was perfect, but because he was human. George Reeves wanted to be remembered as a good actor. But the world remembers something even greater. A man who inspired millions. A man who carried the weight of a hero. A man who gave hope to children during uncertain times. A man whose story continues to touch hearts more than 60 years later. George Reeves lived a life of dreams, strength, struggle, and mystery. His story reminds us that even the people who seem strongest can face battles we never see. But above all, he reminds us that heroes are not just characters. Heroes are people who give light to others, even when